Welcome to our latest in the series of releases of Showbox Sires bulls on dairy business, the evolution of the great cow. In each of our bulls that we release, we try to come up with a podcast with someone that knows a lot about the cow families and knows a lot about breeding cows. And we try to present you the information on the bull and also some knowledge about cattle breeding that may help you make your herd better. So today we're releasing our newest bull through the CMEX Showbox Sires program, 744HO00208 HiJack PRC, a polled red factor bull that comes to us from the Doc 8784 family. He is sired by the popular Red Bull Heatwave and out of a Ranger, daughter of Doc herself, and we'll talk more about that cow. This bull has a lot of unique traits, and we're going to walk through them and why we think he's such a great bull for the industry at this time. So today, my guests on this would be, first of all, Mike Duckett, my partner in Showbox Sires, who is on all these podcasts with us. Mike, how's things with you today?
Good. We're just getting ready to make some second crop hay, so we're staying busy.
I was in Wisconsin recently, and the corn looks great, and that second crop hay is ready to go. But it's a true pleasure for me to introduce our other guest on this series. Again, we try to add someone from the industry, a breeder or an industry leader, to talk about the bulls. And it's our pleasure to welcome John Steinhoff from the Holstein Association. Been a classifier for many years, also a breeder and a real enthusiast, student of the Holstein cow. John is one of these guys that we always have loved to talk about great cows with because of his knowledge of what makes a great cow. So, John, it's a pleasure to welcome you to the Showbox Sires series. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Tim. Glad to be doing this.
Very, very excited about this bull because he brings a couple traits into the Doc family that we really haven't seen much of, polled and red factor. You want to talk a little bit about HiJack and what your thoughts are about the bull, Mike?
With Doc 8784, a cow that we've covered a lot of bases, but now this bull's unique, being polled and red factored bull. That true Doc form. He's a milk bull. He's 1,200 pounds of milk after the base change. Extremely high type, being in 2.5 points of type and almost 2 points for udder, and a little over a point for foot and leg. And with the package of red factored and polled, it just makes him a real unique. Whether you're red breeders or black, he's a bull that's going to do a lot of great things, I believe.
Well, Mike, you referenced his numbers. Interestingly, before we get into the cows and the families behind them, I did a sort this morning of bulls available in AI, and I used the criteria as follows: red factor, 1,200 pounds of milk, 2.5 points of type, 1.9 udders, 1 point of feet and legs, and 0 or better for CCR and DPR. So I put that category in. And Mike, you do this quite a bit. How many bulls would you guess came up on that list?
Well, I have no idea.
Well, I'm going to surprise you. 1. This is the only bull that hit all of those criteria that's available today. We thought we had an interesting package here, but when you put that in there, and I didn't even sort for the poll gene, that gives you one more bonus too. So pretty interesting pile of statistics on this bull. The other thing, Mike, I noticed, I didn't realize till today, he's 35.18 on his LPI in Canada. And that gets him up there in fairly tall cotton, particularly with polled and red factor on the Canadian system with solid numbers. Anyway, the numbers, Mike, you do this all the time. Just give our folks one more thought about how extreme this bull's numbers are.
To find bulls now after the base change that are 1,200 pounds of milk, that's almost unheard of. And so he's kind of a bull that brings the high type, the milk, the fertility traits, the cell count traits, kind of a bull that can please a lot of breeders. And, they're going to be born with the chance of having no horn, and a bull that fits a lot of markets and for a lot of different breeders.
Now we'll go to the bottom side of the pedigree a little bit, because I think that's where we really get excited. And John, we're excited to have you on this podcast to talk a little bit about Mama. When I was at Mike's this past week and walked into the barn, the very first cow you see in the row is the dam of this bull, and you recently had the opportunity to score this cow. You want to talk a little, John, about what you saw in this young cow and what you thought of her?
Cow had already been scored back in the spring, and it made 88. But before I even had pulled her up on the handheld, I saw the cow, like, oh my God, like she's a unit. She's just a very special individual. There's not much bad to say about her. First off, I made her 89. She was 2 years, 7 months of age. I don't make very many 89.2-year-olds. I'll just leave it out at that. I'm pretty certain in the last 15 years, I averaged less than one per year. I can't say that unequivocally and positively, but I'm pretty certain. And she's just a breathtaking individual. She's a cow that's so wide and wide-chested and strong-headed, big-barreled. She's as wide as she is deep-barreled. Like she's just got this massive spring of rib, and her openness of rib is like unbelievable for a 2-year-old. I'm pretty sure I made her into the 40s for dairy form on linear, which there's very few 2-year-olds that need to be or deserve to be 40 plus. And I'm pretty sure I had her like 42 or 43. So that's kind of off the charts for a 2-year-old for dairy form or dairy character. The cow's udder is just smashed right in there. The attachments are so strong and snug. The rear udder is extremely tight, and it's shallow. But yet there's volume to the udder because you got really good width and you got really good length of udder. And I think that's something that's often overlooked by people is, you can have a shallow udder, but you can have them be too shallow. This cow's udder has still got proper amount of capacity because you got length times width times depth. Even though it's a shallow udder, she has a length and a width to compensate. And it's a kind of udder I would think could last and wear and be an extremely high scored udder down the road. Will it be? Nobody knows. But she sure gives the appearance and the look that she will. Well, first off, she got a really good slope from hooks to pins, but then she has tremendous width of rump. It's tremendous width from all the way from the hips back through the thurls and then back into the pins. And she's just an impressive unit. It's fun to run into those kind.
Well, we appreciate your kind words on her. And honestly, I said to someone the other day, if you were to paint a picture of almost the ideal 2-year-old, and this cow's not going to win Madison necessarily.
Nope.
But when you take the traits that you want, dairy strength and width, perfect udder, and a perfect rear end, John, you've kind of alluded to it. You would say if you were to paint a picture, you wouldn't change much, would you?
Nope. If you're trying to breed a herd of cows, she's kind of the closing in on being the epitome, in my opinion. If you were going to change something, she's taller than she needs to be, but she's not over tall. I would guess she's about, I just saw her in the stall. Mike, you can correct me if needed, but I would say she's about 62 inches tall. I went in next to her, and that's what I guessed her to be with the bedding and stuff around her, etc. But that sound about right, Mike?
Yeah, it's 61 and a half to 2 would probably be.
Okay. She's not short, but she's not ogre tall either, which is problematic in any stretch. And then she has so much strength. I think she could be one extreme cow as an older cow. Her best years and best days are ahead of her.
That's certainly the way we feel, John. And Mike, you've been chirping about this daughter of Doc, who subsequently is now Doc's highest scored 2-year-old daughter. There are higher scored daughters, obviously, but I think maybe the only max scored 89.2-year-old. And you've said for some time, Mike, that you think she may be Doc's best daughter. Can you've dealt with all of them. You crawl under them and milk them every day. Tell our listeners why this one's so special.
She's not the install cow for accident because I like to walk in the barn and see her. So that tells you a lot right there. But cow calved August, September-ish, and she got scored in December and was 86. We scored her this spring. She went 88, and now she's 89, and she was scored correct each time. She's making that kind of progress. She was a immature 2-year-old that just needed to fill out a little bit, and that's the way they're supposed to do it. And now she's moving into that maturity, and we say she wouldn't win Madison, but there was a really good cowman here not long after our spring show and said, "Why didn't you take her?" I guess I didn't really have a real good answer why we didn't, but she is a really good cow. She's, like John said, she's got the strength, the width, and her udder is just going to get better every day of her life. A cow that, making a nice record. She's easy going. She's bred back. She's going to be a cow that I could see her being a cow that scores extremely high someday.
I laugh, Mike, because I've been asked the question, why haven't you guys shown the Ranger? My answer, I do have the answer. It's because her ovaries are worth a lot more than a blue ribbon is out of her. Because she might be as in demand as any cow we've had, because she carries the red gene. She's got big numbers. We've sold IVF sessions out of her to some of the best breeders in the world. I know Panda Holsteins in the UK had great success with an IVF session out of her. Pine Tree has bought an IVF session. So the greatest breeders in the world recognize this pedigree and this cow. Pretty excited about what she brings. And Mike, you said something I want to make sure our listeners understand. The cow's bred back. That's the cool part. We've IVF'd her like crazy as a heifer. She bred right back, bred as quickly as possible as a heifer. Calved her in, did all this stuff, started IVFing her again, bred her back again. She's pregnant again. So reproductively, pretty darn cool to have that. John, I want to switch gears, and we've all talked about Doc 8784 a fair amount of time. You probably scored the cow more than once. Tell us a little about Grandma, who, when you go to Duckett Holsteins, there's a monument in front of the barn with her gravestone because of the influence she's having in the breed, and it's only just begun. John, talk a little about the Doc and what you thought of that cow.
Doc who? I'm not sure I know who you're talking about.
Exactly.
So she's actually, for sure, in my top 10 favorite cows I've ever scored, and potentially a top half a dozen. I haven't actually really thought of all the different cows through the years, but I would say probably Shakira is a favorite cow that I've ever scored. They take like Footloose and some of those, and Treasure, for sure, Treasure. So anyway, but she's in the very upper echelon of all the cows. When she went 95, I had nominated her for 95, and that was a month after Madison, or a month, maybe 6 weeks after Madison. The day that I scored her, she actually was second at Madison that year as a 4-year-old, correct, Mike?
Third, but ended up reserve All-American.
So anyhow, I was thinking she was second, but anyway, the day I scored her, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, no question whatsoever, she would have won that class at Madison. She had really, really filled out, massed out, bodied down, tipped her pins down. She had a terrific slope to the rump. And you want to talk about rump width? It's like off the charts. Like she's a 70 or 75 on a 50-point scale for rump width. And then just tremendous dairy strength, very, very open ribbed, terrific uddered cow. Just one of my absolute favorite cows that I've ever scored.
And I would say, John, not to put words in your mouth, but can't you see a lot of similarities in this young 2-year-old to Doc, maybe even a little ahead of where Doc was at that stage of her life, right?
The Doc, I don't remember seeing her as a 2-year-old per se, but from what I would project this 2-year-old to look like when she's third lactation, I would say that the 2-year-old has a legitimate chance of being even nicer than the Doc was as third lactation cow.
Yeah,
like she's got the same general width of rump, has that slope to the rump, terrific udder, maybe even a little nicer turn at the top of the rear udder than the Doc did, but then the same well extended, super long and strong and snug fore udder attachment, the shallow udder, the great capacity. As I said before, length times width times depth. She's kind of complete package, and then the extreme openness of rib, but just massive power for a young 2-year-old.
And Mike, you were the guy that's worked with both those cows. Would you echo those thoughts?
Where I would give this 2-year-old advantage is definitely leg set from the side. Like Doc was, she had, I wouldn't call her straight legged, but her tended to be a little straighter in her hock, like the Jedi Dam was. You couldn't ask this Ranger to track any straighter, and she has almost the perfect set to her leg, where if you were changing Doc as a young cow. But now Doc's legs got better over time because, she spent the bigger part of her younger life in a 3,500 cow freestall situation, and it just got better as she got off the concrete and was a little more pampered. But I would say that's where I'd give the Ranger a little bit of an advantage.
Yeah, I would definitely concur with that, what you just said, Mike, about the leg set. And then I misspoke before. I said about just seeing her in the stall. I did get her out and I walked her. And I think I actually said to you, if I'm going to do what I'm thinking I'm going to do, I want to get this, I want to see the cow out. I don't want to have them just standing in a stall, and make sure I see everything about the cow before I pull the trigger and go that high.
One thing we talk a lot about in this podcast series is dairy strength. We've had these discussions offline with you before, but I'd like our listeners to hear your view of dairy strength, if you don't mind going into that a little bit. And I think, again, this young cow is the epitome of dairy strength. She's wide, she's dairy, she's all the things, but I want to let you talk about it. We talk all the time about people not understanding the difference between skinny and dairy. And I think your experience in this business and your knowledge of the cow and how she works is important. Can you give our listeners a little bit of a lesson in your and John Steinhoff language about what is dairy strength? What's it mean? And why is it important?
Well, it's combining the two of dairy character and strength. You have dairy character and you have skinny dairy. Thin cows, these thin heifers, thin calves, whatever, that look to the naked eye, to the average person, potentially as though they're dairy, and they're really not. But dairy character really truly evolves around openness of rib, starting with that. If you have an open ribbed animal, that animal is going to be a milk cow. If you have a tight ribbed animal, they're likely not going to be a good milk cow. And then you combine that along with your sweep of rib, your angularity, or the angle to the rib, long ribs looking back toward the forudder, if you will, springer rib, the pop in the barrel, all components to dairy character. And then having that nice shoulder, nice wedgy shoulder, the long, clean dairy neck, the proper head. Head, you prefer it to be long, but not only have some length in the head, but you definitely got to have some femininity. But to go along with it, you got to have strength to go along with the femininity of the head. And when you have a strong head, you have a head that has some substance through the lower jaw. And that's incredibly important. And then you have these big, broad muzzled, big open nostril type of cows. And that's really where your strength starts. And if you've got a broad muzzled cow, you have a big open nostril individual. I tell people I want that muzzle to be the size of Texas, and I want to be able to plant my fist inside of that nostril. And when you have those two things along with a wide chest floor with a big springer forerib, now you've got a generally healthy cow that is long lived. They are the types of cows that do not require a veterinarian to be treating them or somebody treating them on a regular basis, if at all. And you have a cow that produces a lot of milk lifetime. You combine all of that, that's what it takes to be a really good cow. And it starts when they're a calf. I tell people this a lot of times. If you take going to sales, and I used to go to a lot of sales, used to work a lot of sales, people consigning show age calves to sales, people get buffaloed too often by having a nice, pretty made, well-balanced kind of calf, but she's kind of a needle-nosed bugger. They bring more money than they're worth, to be honest. Then when they bring that money, now they calve in as a 2-year-old. How many of them end up being good cows? Not very often. Starts at the head. I learned this from Cy Letter, who I respect immensely as a cow person. He's the best cow person on our classification staff. And I learned this from Cy, a term I guess you might say that he uses, the head don't lie. And I stole that from him. And it's true, the head does not lie. So you've got to have dairy character combined with strength to create dairy strength. Now you've got a cow that makes a healthy, long-lived, high production cow.
Well, those are great words of advice for our breeders. I think too many times we use the terms, John, but we can't put the backing as to why we use the terms. And I love your description of that. I think any breeder, anybody that looks at cows every day can go look at their cows. And I'll bet, John, if you take your 5 best cows in your herd, whether you milk 5,000 or you milk 50, I'll bet your 5 best cows, if you record this and you play that back and you go look at your cow, John, I bet they're all going to look like that. If
your old cows, your 5th, 8th, 10th lactation cows that milk year in and year out. And I think another thing that kind of correlates along with this, is they tend to be not only healthy cows, but they're better reproductively. If you take cows that have power and strength to them, there's a correlation to having more sound reproduction, and they're the kinds of cows that get bred back, calf back, boom, away they take off and milk again.
Back to the bull a little bit, Mike. We talked about red factor and polled and all his great statistics. How would you use this bull? What direction would you go with? As people always want to know how to mate these.
Just from the red side of it, with his stature and strength and the amount of milk, and you're not going to give up. You're not sacrificing type. Bulls like Architect, Acetylene, Unstoppable, Warrior, Aircraft, all those are the kind of the more popular bloods right now. And this bull worked great on those. And the top side of his pedigree being a heat wave, it's Red Eye and Swingman and Salvatore. I mean, if you go into some red herds, the Swingmen always have great udders. But I don't think you have to just use this bull on red blood. I mean, he's there's some unique stuff to him with that being that high in milk and that high in type and polled. I think he's got a lot of potential use in both red and black.
Well, we would agree. I think the bull, we'll probably try to make some sons of the bull because he's so extreme, Mike. In our Showbox program, we may take some of the great lambdas and some of that kind of breeding, try to make a red factor polled one, from a family that doesn't have that gene in there. So he gives you that luxury, doesn't he?
That's what I was going to just throw in there. You don't even realize it, but there's no lambda here. That opens him up to a lot of cows. Lambda was a bull that took a lot of great show pedigrees and added some production and some genomic to it. This bull could just keep pushing that next generation even higher, and a perfect cross on those.
The other bull, Mike, that I'd be curious, what about alligator? This bull should work well on alligator daughters, shouldn't he?
One of our favorite bulls in our whole program's image being a sidekick, all the sidekick with this much milk, that high a type. I think it's a perfect combination.
I think good advice for people as they figure out how to use HiJack PRC. John, as we wrap up this conversation, we certainly appreciate having you on. Any final thoughts on this 2-year-old on Doc, throwing the red gene and the polled gene into this package?
Well, I think I shared a lot of things about the two cows. I don't need to go down that road anymore. However, just the idea of having the polled gene in there and the red carrier, I think creates a lot of uniqueness. It's one of those situations that if I'm breeding a herd of cows, I would definitely consider using this bull. Probably beyond consider, probably would be almost certainly be using him. And I think he's the kind of bull that, based on his genomic profile, you can probably use pretty heavily and not really go wrong. I don't like the idea of shotgun breeding per se, but people shotgun breed all the time. But if you're going to shotgun breed a bull, pick a bull of the week or whatever and go breed, in a 5,000 cow herd or whatever. It's kind of bull that you can add milk and create a lot of other unique opportunities within your herd and make nice cows.
Well, we certainly appreciate your advice to our customers and our listeners, John. Always good to have legendary cow people on our podcast. Mike, you've worked with John a long time. Maybe give him a John story or what's your thoughts about John are, because I know what you think of John.
Obviously, being here in Wisconsin, John, he gets into our barn quite often, and it's always nice. Just like all the other breeders, you want your cows to score as high as they will, and John comes in and gives you an honest opinion, and you can twist his arm, but he's kind of a big guy, so he's hard to beat on because you can beat, but you're not going to hurt him. But John always comes in, he looks at the cows, he gives you your honest opinion, and then at the end of the day, you leave and you know why he scored them that way, and it's good because he answers all your questions and he's accurate with his scores, and we appreciate having John, and we get him quite often, being that we're right here in Wisconsin, and I know he goes a lot of other places, and people enjoy his visits as well.
It's well said, Mike. John, one quick John Tim story. I'd talk to you for years about cows. I'd call him about cows that I'd see, or he'd call me about cows he saw. We talked on the phone many times, but I didn't know who the heck the guy was. And he came up and tapped me on the shoulder one day at World Dairy Expo. He said, "You don't know who I am, do you?" And I think that's how you and I finally met, John, we'd talked many years and never met. But John has a great reputation for being a great cow man, but also very dedicated to helping the breed. And John, the thousands of customers you've helped and now the breeders you've helped in our podcast. We're indebted to you in the business for your dedication to the breed. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments.
And Mike, I would say I was just in your herd. You clearly didn't twist his arm hard enough everywhere. He didn't get him all right, but I don't think he ever will he?
No. Classifier's always wrong somewhere.
I didn't want to leave this podcast without throwing one barb at him because well, folks, it's been a pleasure having this podcast today. We hope you've learned something, learned a little bit about our bull, maybe learned more about the business and about breeding cows. That's what's fun about this. That's why Mike and I are loving what we're doing right now in this project at Showbox Sires. We're having a great time. To wrap this up, we hope you'll take a good hard look, get on our website, get with your CMEX rep and distributor around the world, 744 HO208, HiJack PRC, the Heat Wave out of the max scored 89 Ranger 1133, right out of the great Reserve All-American Doc 8784. A bull that combines lots and lots of good traits, high milk, high production, red gene, and the pole gene. We thank you for listening to this session of the Evolution of the Great Cow, the series about our new release bulls at Showbox Sires. We hope you'll continue to join us for our podcast on dairy business.